Since the beginning of the 2022 Russo-Ukrainian War, Russia lost a lot of equipment. In this video, we listed the top 10 best Russian equipment lost in Ukraine so far. Enjoy! Number 10 is the BMPT Terminator. The Terminator was created as a result of the experience of the wars in Chechnya, where the Russians suffered high losses during combat in urban areas. The new vehicle was supposed to solve this problem by combining solid armor, which thanks to the use of relict ERA, is equal to the T-90M tanks, with powerful armament, which is housed in a remote-controlled turret module, including two 30mm 2A42 autocannons, for Ataka T anti-tank guided missile launchers, and a 7.62mm PKTM machine gun. The crew of the approximately 48-ton Terminator consists of 5 soldiers, commander, gunner, driver, and 2 additional gunners, operating 30mm grenade launchers, which are placed on both sides of the hull. Before the outbreak of war, the Russians had about 10 such vehicles in their arsenal. The first, and so far only confirmed loss occurred on February 9, 2023, near Kreminna in the Luhansk Oblast. Number 9 is the T-90M. The first T-90M was delivered in the spring of 2020, and they are currently the latest version of the T-90 tank in service with the Russian Armed Forces. The T-90M is created both by rebuilding older versions and by newly built machines. The scope of modernization is about increasing firepower, improving armor and mobility. The main armament is a 125mm 2A46 M5 smoothbore gun, which allows for usage of newly developed Svinets 1 and Svinets 2 APF-SDS rounds with tungsten and depleted uranium penetrators, as well as 9M119M Reflex anti-tank guided missiles. But the biggest advantage of the T-90M over other tanks used by Russia is that, unlike previous designs, with one small exception that I will mention in a moment, the commander has his own independent panoramic observation site called PKPAN Sokolny Głaz at his disposal. This solution has been a standard for Western tanks for a very long time. In Russia, it is only a standard for the T-90M and the T-14. A small exception, which I mentioned a moment ago, is the usage in Ukraine of a few T-72B3 Model 2014. They were previously seen only during the famous tank biathlon competition held in Russia. Before the war, the Russians had 67 T-90Ms. However, since then, they produced more of these tanks, and despite the losses, their number now exceeds 100. Until now, they have lost 6 tanks, including 2 captured by the Ukrainians. Number 8 is the 2S-33 Musta SM2. This is the latest incarnation of the Musta S, which was developed back in the times of the USSR. The first 35 2S-33 Musta SM2, also known as the 2S-19 M2 Musta S, were delivered on June 26, 2013. The 2S-33 Musta SM2 is armed with a modernized 152mm 47 caliber 2A64 M2 howitzer, although the maximum range of fire has not changed. Thanks to the new fire control system, the Russians managed to increase the rate of fire to 10 rounds per minute, which places the 2S-33 Musta SM2 among the fastest firing self-propelled howitzers in the world. Automatization and a high rate of fire also translated into the ability to fire up to 5 rounds in such a way that they hit the target at the same time. Before the war, they had 350 2S-33 Musta SM2s. Until now, confirmed losses are 25 vehicles, including 16 captured by the Ukrainians. Number 7 is the Fourpost RU. Except for the Orion, which I mentioned in the previous video, the Russians have lost another interesting UCAV in this conflict, namely the Fourpost RU. The Fourpost RU was first presented at the Army 2021 Arms Exhibition. It's an armed version of the Fourpost R, which in turn is a modification of the Israeli Searcher II, which had been produced by Russia under license as Fourpost. The Fourpost RU is powered by an 85 horsepower engine, weighs about 500 kilograms, has a range of 450 kilometers, and its maximum operating time is 18 hours. The armament carried is 2 bombs, one under each wing. It includes, among others, the laser-guided KA-B-20L, the KA-B-20S, which are satellite-guided with the use of the GLONASS system, or the anti-tank XBPLA, which is a modification of the Cornet-D. Before the war, Russia had 10 such unmanned combat aerial vehicles. So far, they have lost one machine, which, for unknown reasons, flew into a power line north of Belgorod and burned down. Number 6 is the Tor M2. The Russians lost many air defense systems in this conflict, such as Buk and Pantsir, but the most interesting of them is Tor, due to the fact that the Russians are losing the systems of its latest third version, the 9K332 Tor M2. Tor is a short-range surface-to-air missile system capable of combating all types of unmanned and manned air targets. The regimental set of Tor M2, which means 4 batteries, a total of 16 9A331M Tor M2 launchers, enables the simultaneous combat of approximately 64 different air targets. The first regimental 9K332 Tor M2 set was handed over to the Russian Armed Forces in June 2016. But the most interesting version is the 9K331 MDT Tor M2 DT, which is adapted for use in Arctic conditions. So far, the Russians have 12 launchers delivered in 2018. At the time of making this video, they lost 9 9A330 Tor launchers, 9 9A331 Tor M1 launchers, 9 of the newest 9A331M Tor M2 launchers, and 2 Arctic Tor M2 DT. Before the war, the Russians had over 230 launchers in various versions, including about 84 of the latest version. Since then, they have delivered another 24 in the latest configuration, which to some extent covered the losses. Number 5 is the Mi-28N. Mi-28's road from creation to the introduction was long and bumpy. The prototype was created in 1982 as a competition for the Ka-50 to replace the Mi-24, but eventually the Mi-28 lost and officially entered service in the significantly improved version, the Mi-28N, in 2009. The Mi-28N, which is often compared to the AH-64 Apache, is armed with a 30mm 2A42 autocannon. In addition, there are 4 external hardpoints for suspending various combinations of armament with a total weight of 1,600 kilograms. Interestingly, the Mi-28N doesn't have a radar, which appeared in helicopters for the Russian Armed Forces only in the UB Training and Combat version, introduced in 2017. And in the Mi-28NM, introduced into service in 2020. In the case of the Mi-28NM, which they only have a few, in addition to the radar and data processing system, the fire control system has been modernized. It was equipped with the defense system used on the Ka-52, and new armament has been integrated, such as GPS-guided LMUR missiles with a range of 14.5 kilometers. Before the war, the Russian military had about 110 Mi-28Ns, NMs, and UBs. So far, they have lost 7 of them. Number 4 is the Ka-52. Serial production of the Ka-52 was started in 2008, but the first helicopter entered service with the Russian Armed Forces in May 2011. The Ka-52 is armed with a 30mm 2A42 autocannon. In addition, there are 6 external hardpoints for various combinations of armaments, with a total weight of up to 2 tons. An example of such weaponry is the 9K121 Vickers, of which the Ka-52 can carry up to 12. They have a range of up to 10,000 meters and can penetrate up to 1,000 millimeters of steel armor behind explosive reactive armor. Interestingly, on January 4, 2023, the Russians announced the delivery of 10 helicopters in the new version, the Ka-52M. However, it's not known whether they are new or modernized. The Ka-52M has been equipped with, among others, a new AESA radar, which is capable of detecting objects the size of an armored combat vehicle from a distance of 45 kilometers, or a new improved avionics. It was also adapted to the same armament as the Mi-28NM. Before the war, Russian armed forces operated around 133 Ka-52s. At the time of publishing this video, they lost 29 of them. Each one costs $14.5 million. Number 3 is the Su-34. The Su-34 was developed primarily for the strike attack role to replace the Su-24. The Su-34 design retains the Su-27 basic layout, construction of the airframe, engines, most of its wing structure, tail, and substantial part of onboard equipment. It's armed with a 30mm GSH-301 cannon with 180 rounds. Aircraft has 12 underwing and under fuselage hardpoints for a wide variety of weapons. The Su-34 normally carries 4 tons of weapons, however, the maximum capacity is 8 tons. Since the publication of the previous video, the Russians have started using in Ukraine a new version of this aircraft, the Su-34M. It has modified onboard electronic system that allow for the use of a new optical, electronic, and radar reconnaissance pod from the Sich family. Also new is the Kopai DL rearward-facing radar, which, if necessary, warns of approaching threats and automatically deploys countermeasures and jamming. Currently, the number of Su-34s of both types delivered to the Russian armed forces exceeds 150, from which you have to subtract the losses, which are, as of the publication of this video, 18 older Su-34s, and 1 the latest Su-34M. Number 2 is the Su-35S. The Su-35S offers a feature set and performance, making it very nearly a 5th-generation fighter jet. It falls short on only 2 requirements: lack of stealth technology and active phased array radar. While lacking an APAR, the Su-35S new IBRIS phased array radar control system can detect targets at distances up to 400 kilometers and track simultaneously up to 4 ground targets or up to 30 airborne targets, as well as engaging up to 8 airborne targets at the same time. Besides, the radar control system has the friend or foe identification capability for aerial and maritime objects, is capable of identifying the class and type of airborne targets, and taking aerial photos of the ground. It's armed with a 30mm GSH-301 cannon with 150 rounds, and has 12 hardpoints for mounting missiles. At the time of making this video, the confirmed losses are 2 aircraft. One Su-35S costs around $31 million. Before the war, Russian armed forces operated around 103 Su-35S. However, since then they have produced a couple of new aircraft, and currently, despite the losses, they have around 110 Su-35Ss in their arsenal. Number 1 is the S-400. The S-400 is currently the most modern Russian long-range surface-to-air and anti-ballistic missile system. Its task is to combat all kinds of air threats, including intercontinental ballistic missiles with nuclear warheads in the final phase of their flight. The history of this system dates back to the late 1980s, and the goal was to replace the S-300s. The first S-400s entered service on April 28, 2007. The Russians declare that the radar for the S-400 complex is capable of detecting targets from a distance of up to 600 kilometers, and the range of combating the enemy when using 40 N6 missiles is even 400 kilometers. Unfortunately, the reality is not so perfect, because in Ukraine, the successes of the S-400 on the battlefield against the HIMARSs are, to put it mildly, modest. To make matters even worse, in 2019, the Swedish Defense Research Agency published a report, according to which the capabilities of the S-400 are twice as low as declared. Before the war, the Russians had 448 S-400 launchers in their arsenal. Until now, they've lost one of them. Interestingly, 4 S-400 batteries were purchased in 2017 by Turkey, which is a NATO member. After this event, it was forbidden to purchase the planned 100 F-35s. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Also, visit our second channel with military power comparisons. See you next time!